This is Inside PHLCouncil, bringing you the latest news from Philadelphia City Council, straight from the source. Inside PHLCouncil is hosted by Joe Grace and Patty Gillett.
Hi, I'm Joe Grace, City Council's Communications Director.
Hi, I'm Patty Gillett, Council's Deputy Communications Director. Welcome back to Inside PHLCouncil.
Patty, as usual, I say it every week, there's a lot going on. The election's over. We know who's coming to join City Council in January, 4 new members. Council has a few more sessions before this term goes in the books. So Council just approved a new right to counsel for people facing eviction from their homes and apartments. We got a new red flag law to make it easier for a citizen to ask a court for an order for somebody to turn over their firearms if they're a danger to themselves. And we got a wage tax cut coming for 51,000 Philadelphians struggling to make ends meet. Fines for overdue library books may be wiped away thanks to a council member's resolution and an action by the mayor. Let's get it going. It's all yours.
Right, Joe. A right to counsel for people in Philadelphia facing eviction is a good place to start. In its November 14th meeting, Council passed a right to counsel bill that advocates say will not only help tenants avoid eviction, it may help keep them out of poverty as well. Council approved the bill proposed by Councilmember Gim to provide a city-subsidized lawyer for low-income renters facing eviction. Landlords file over 20,000 evictions in Philadelphia per year. It's the fourth highest total in the nation. And without a lawyer, families are displaced from their homes in 78% of those eviction cases.
Wow.
But when families with lawyers are displaced just 5% of the time, according to a 2018 report by the Philadelphia Bar Association. It's a big difference. The city's initial investment in Right to Counsel program is about $5 million. Again, as we said, Councilmember Gim led the way on this reform in council, and here's what she had to say before the bill passed. Evictions in our city disproportionately target Black women, many of them single heads of households, and make children twice as likely to end up in foster care. Today, we showed the world that cities can put a stop to this eviction crisis and build a better justice system at the same time. For reference, Gim's bill is part of a growing national trend and follows similar laws in New York City, San Francisco, Newark, and Cleveland.
That is really an interesting issue, and credit to Councilmember Gim and the whole council for moving forward on this and joining this national trend. Let's keep moving. Patty, it seems we can't go a week or even a day around Philly without another act of gun violence that shocks your conscience. Council took some action on guns too, didn't they?
Yes, they did. And yes, the gun violence is unrelenting. Just in recent weeks, a 2-year-old girl was fatally shot in her family home. An 11-month-old boy was shot and critically wounded as his father was allegedly involved in a drug deal. And a 10-year-old boy was shot in the head as he walked home from school. So City Council did act, approving a red flag law introduced by Councilmember Curtis Jones. And this law is designed to make it easier for citizens to flag individuals deemed a danger to themselves or others and obtain court approval to remove the guns from their possession.
Right.
Again, this bill was sponsored by Councilman Jones and co-sponsored by Councilmember Johnson. It's intended to allow citizens to seek help more swiftly if they sense a neighborhood situation brewing that might get out of control and involve guns, as we know happens very often.
Yeah.
Our babies deserve this kind of protection, Jones said during the floor remarks after the bill was approved, 16-0. He cited data indicating that 28 children aged 10 or younger have been shot in Philadelphia since 2018.
That is just such an outrageous statistic. And I hope people listening heard you say that. 28 kids, 10 or younger, shot just since 2018. It's just horrendous. I'm glad Council took some action. We need a lot more. Switching gears. Councilmember Dom has an idea to help people struggling in poverty. Tell us about it.
Sure. Councilmember Dom's bill to provide a wage tax credit for up to $1,000 to qualifying Philadelphians received preliminary approval in Council on November 14th. In a committee hearing, Dom said the average refund for city residents would be $41 per month. Now, the Kenney administration testified that while it supported the goal of helping lower-income citizens ease their local tax burden, it did not support the bill at this time, and they preferred to discuss the policy during the budget process coming up in spring 2020. Council members disagreed. Here's what Dom said. We should not be taxing people who cannot put food on the table. It's just wrong, and whatever we can do to correct that and fix it, we need to do. Council President Clark also said that he supports the bill, and he ties it to Council's broader effort to alleviate poverty. And again, as we've stated repeatedly on the podcast, Council's Special Committee on Poverty has the goal of lifting 100,000 Philadelphians out of poverty by 2024.
I think we can't keep talking about that enough, and we are predicting this for our listeners. You're going to hear us talk a lot more about it, and maybe from some council members too in the weeks and the months ahead. Let me take up the next one quickly, if I could, Patty. In what's likely a policy win for a council member, Mayor Kenney has called on the Free Library of Philadelphia to repeal its policy of levying fines on library users for overdue books. Just a month after Councilmember Sherelle Parker offered a resolution to hold hearings in council on the topic of overdue library book fines and suggesting the city end this practice, Mayor Kenney announced his call to end the fine practice as well. The policy can only be rescinded, though, by vote of the Library Board of Trustees, which meets, I think, next month, early next month. The mayor credited Councilmember Parker in his statement for calling attention to the issue, and Councilmember Parker, in turn, credited Chicago and its new mayor, Lori Lightfoot, for initiating the policy there and giving her the idea to propose a similar reform in Philadelphia. Patty, that's all we got for today, but before I turn it over to you to close it out, I just want to take a moment and say happy Thanksgiving to all our listeners.
Oh, great. Thanks, Joe. Happy Thanksgiving to our listeners, and happy Thanksgiving to you.
Thank you. You too.
Okay. The next stated meeting of the Philadelphia City Council will take place on December 5th, starting at 10 a.m. in council chambers on the 4th floor of City Hall. That is our second to last meeting of this term. As a reminder, our last meeting of this term takes place December 12th. As always, you can follow all of Council's committee hearings and meetings on Xfinity Channel 64, Fios Channel 40, or you can stream live at phlcouncil.com/watch. We also encourage you to read our weekly report from City Council by visiting our website at phlcouncil.com. That is usually up Friday morning following a stated meeting, bright and early.
Read the weekly report from City Council. It's good. And your communicators from City Hall do a lot of work on this, and it's a quick way to get a sense of what's happening in City Council.
Absolutely. It's a summary of the week, so you don't have to watch hours and hours of committee hearings.
You don't want to watch and listen to a hearing for 4 hours?
4 hours.
I'm shocked.
Well, we do. That's why we work here.
Exactly.
All right. You can hear earlier editions of our podcast, Inside PHL Council, by visiting iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. So if you're new to the podcast, please go back and catch up.
Terrific. Again, happy Thanksgiving to you, Patty, and to all our listeners.
Enjoy a very Philly Thanksgiving.
You too.
Like what you're hearing? Be sure to subscribe to Inside PHL Council on your favorite podcast app.
We're back on Inside PHL Council with Councilmember Derek Green. Councilmember, good afternoon.
Good afternoon. It's a pleasure to join this podcast. Actually, I was interested in doing a podcast of my own. However, it takes a lot of time, a lot of content, and my staff advised me that would not be the easiest thing to do with my crazy schedule. So thank you for doing this. I think it's a great opportunity to engage council members and just the listening public about different ideas and thoughts outside of the public comment or other meetings that we have in this building and beyond.
We're very excited to be here with you today, and because we sensed that you had given some real thought to the idea of podcasts. So we're going to dive right in.
Okay.
So as we record this, you're just weeks away from the end of your first term, your freshman term on council. But, our view is that most people don't treat you as a freshman, since you have real experience here previously as a council staffer for a number of years.
Yeah, I used to have hair then, too.
My hair used to be blonde when I first met you. Given that you came into office with a fair amount of knowledge, council member, of how council actually works, was there anything that happened this term that surprised you at all?
I guess the biggest thing that surprised me is that nothing will surprise you. You can try to prepare as much as possible for being a member of council. From my perspective, I did, interviews with staff starting probably the summer of 2015. We had 2 staff meetings prior to being swearing in January of 2016. But there's no issue you can prepare for. You never know what's going to happen. Did not know that one of the first things that would happen when we got into council was a boiler explosion at FS Edmonds, which is not far from where I live, northwest part of the city in Mount Airy. And for me, that was something that was very concerning because I have a son in the school district and my mother taught in the school district for close to 31 years. And so my first legislative act was how do we protect both the employees that work in our buildings. Unfortunately, we had a member of SCIU, 32BJ, lost his life at that boiler explosion at Edmonds Elementary School. And so I've done a lot of work with the Philadelphia Federation Teachers through their Fund Our Facilities Coalition. So that was one of the first things that occurred early part of that first couple of months, actually the first 2 months in council. So you never know. You can prepare as much as you would like, but life has a way of happening, and so we have to adjust accordingly. And I think the other thing that was different is that as someone who tries to consider themselves as once a staffer, always a staffer, you have to really know how to delegate and give up things. There's things that I've tried to continue to do, but my staff has wisely advised me to give that up. And sometimes that's hard to do because I try to be a very hands-on, no-frills type of person. And so, but at the same time, you have to give up certain things because you only have X amount of hours and minutes in a day.
That was an extremely thorough answer, which is about exactly what we thought we would get when we had a chance to start doing this with you. If I go off script, I'll get in trouble with my co-host. But when you talked about the Fund Our Facilities Coalition, you obviously have a real interest in that area, and you just introduced a budget ordinance or a budget measure not long ago to increase funding for infrastructure for the schools, did you not?
Right, and that was really focused on when we came back to council on September 12th, the day before on September 11th, we had a press conference with members of that coalition. That's a very unique coalition because for the first time you have members of city council, state representatives, state senators, members of the building trades and labor, as well as teachers, Philadelphia Federation of Teachers, all come together to really try to push for a major capital investment in our schools, especially trying to get more money at the state level. And so coming out of that press conference the day before, we learned that a teacher who had been teaching at Meredith Elementary School for a long time was diagnosed with mesothelioma, which is the cancer most notably associated with asbestos. And so that's what prompted me that next day in council to introduce a transfer ordinance to provide additional money to the school district to deal with asbestos remediation. Since then, we've had conversations with the school district and learned that they really have some major capacity issues, both internally and externally, that even with those dollars, they would have some challenges even spending the money. So we're now kind of going back to the drawing board and thinking about, as we go into 2020, how can we provide resources and oversight to try to really get at these issues that have been systemic at the school district regarding making our buildings safe for not only for children to learn, but teachers to teach and other employees to work, and parents like myself to volunteer and visit as well.
That's a really important issue, and I threw it in because I heard you talk about the Fund Our Facilities Coalition. And thank you for the update on your bill. Looking back on this term, it's really kind of hard to overstate the diversity in the kinds of legislations that you've supported. Legislation on everything from reforming city procurement, regulatory reform, strengthening the Fair Practices Ordinance, medical marijuana, and even the 2020 census. In fact, the hashtag that you use on social media is hashtag Derek is everywhere, which is really appropriate because not only because you're an at-large councilman, but because of this really diverse body of work. Tell us how you and your staff decide the issues that you're going to prioritize and work on.
Well, some of that goes back to the fact I try to get out of City Hall as much as possible as an at-large member of council. The entire city is your district, so sometimes people will say to me, what's your district? And I say the whole city. And so I try to get out of City Hall as much as possible to really see what's going on in our city. And you really can get a flavor of what's going on if you're in City Hall every day. So I'll visit organizations from early part of this week. Was with the Greater Northeast Chamber of Commerce at a community college of Philadelphia Northeast branch to just earlier today I was in western part of the city at NASDAQ. They relocated from 19th and Market to the FMC Tower. So I do a lot of different visits and tours from St. John's Hospice to Face-to-Face in Germantown to Prevention Point in Kensington. So I really try to get out of City Hall as much as possible to really see what's happening in our city. And I think by doing that, that's what gives me opportunity and different ideas regarding legislation, different concerns. So when you look at some of the things I've done from the Fair Practice Ordinance, I am a strong proponent of small businesses, but at the same point, we need to make sure that all businesses provide equality in our city and don't discriminate against anyone based on their ethnicity, gender orientation, or other type of preference. And so that legislation came to me based on a conversation that someone brought to me about some of the historical discriminatory aspects of inclusion or lack thereof of African Americans, especially in certain bars and restaurants in the neighborhood. And so that was something that someone brought to my attention, and I thought, and I don't like to see people taken advantage of, and so that informed me and introducing that legislation. So I'm a strong believer in the marketplace of ideas, and because I do get around and have a lot of different interests, it's part of the other reason why I don't have as much hair as I used to. But also my staff sometimes gets on me because I try to take on a lot of things. And I guess from my perspective, as an at-large member of City Council, you're supposed to be here to represent the entire city, and I try to do that to the best of my ability.
Thank you.
I remember, this is Patty, I remember, I think I get a sense of what being an at-large member was really like from you. We were at an event, a press event at the Pen and Pencil Club, and it was something like 7 o'clock in the evening. And you got up from the event, put your coat on, and happened to just mention offhand, not as a complaint, that you had 4 more stops to make that night. And that's where it really sunk in. I was like, yeah, that's what being at large is like, you know.
Right.
So I appreciate that. So as a former staffer, I think you would agree that it's really difficult to cover the legislative ground and actually the actual ground that you cover without having a really strong staff behind you. And you do have a really strong staff. I work with them. I've worked with them for 4 years. We're about to have 4 new freshmen in this body. What advice would you give your new colleagues about building a staff that works as well as yours does together?
Well, I've had opportunity to sit down with the 3 Democratic, council members elect over the summer to kind of give my perspective. I think I have a meeting with the other council member elect in coming weeks. And so what I've often told them is that, you have to build a strong team, and you try to develop a balance of people with different backgrounds and interests to try to complement each other. It may not always work. I interviewed all of my staff prior to me bringing them on, even people I've worked with for a long time, to kind of get their thoughts and perspectives of what they would like to do and what they see their role in this office. I try to blend ideas from a lot of different elected officials I saw in the past. So even when I won the primary in May of 2015, I met with a number of existing council members from different backgrounds, from Brian O'Neill to Jamie Blackwell to former council members, just trying to get a sense of how they organize their offices and try to infuse those ideas into my perspective. But what I've told all of the incoming council members, at the end of the day, you're the person that the people elected, and so you got to make the decision that works best for you. There'll be a lot of people from a lot of different backgrounds that'll tell you you got to do it this way, you've got to do it that way. At the end of the day, you got to make the decision because you are the person that was elected and decided to run. And so often I'm a strong proponent of, if something doesn't feel right, your instincts probably telling you it's not right. So you should try to do the best of your ability to do the research and try to bring in the best team possible, but do ultimately what works best for you and not what other people tell you. And so I've tried to do that with my staff. And I also try to do a lot of creative things with my staff. We do a monthly staff meeting. I do a weekly legislative retreat. We do a birthday club where we celebrate staff members' birthdays, generally on the Friday of the month, in the month of their birthday, to get together. We do different staff outings. I do an annual retreat with staff off-site, different locations from Bartram Gardens to Franklin Institute to American Museum of American Revolution to Eastern State Penitentiary, just trying to get different exposure and ideas. I do staff outings. We did a staff outing at the Japanese Shofusu House, and a lot of the stuff comes from different locations I've had a chance to visit because I try to get around City Hall. So I just try to blend all the different things and try to have kind of a very open door policy. I do annual reviews with staff, and we look at, and they have to do a 360 review where they submit a perspective on the ways they think they can improve as a city employee and ways we can work on. And so I try to use my experiences in the private sector as well as in other experiences to try to have the best team possible. I say that I'm human like anyone else, so I often really encourage my staff to be critical of the things I'm doing because I want to hear frank perspectives in reference to how I can be the best elected official that I can.
I hope some of the other council members elect are taking notes because that was all really good advice.
Incredibly impressive.
And one other thing I will say is that when we came into the office, I felt that it's important for my staff to get to know other staffs. So I hosted a number of get-togethers with other offices where we would get together. I remember we met with Alan Dom's office. I think it was Paris Bistro. And we've done a number of get-togethers with other council offices at the restaurant at the Clothespin in Center Square, because I think there are situations as an at-large member that you'll come in contact with different issues. And so it's if you see someone in the hallway and you had a chance to have a beer with them or French fries or whatever, it makes it easier to deal with issues. And I think that type of open-door policy is something I've tried to do. We've tried to do a lot of multi-office events, from the Halloween party we do every year to, I do an annual birthday party for myself. I be trying to organize the other staffs when we do inauguration type things. Because I think that helps to develop a bond of collegiality among members and among staffs, because the staffs are, often the people that get a lot of the work done.
Yes. Yes, that's very true, and we've talked about this many times, that once you're a council staffer, it's like college. You're a council alum. Even if you go somewhere else, we always remember that you worked here. So back to the staffing question, let's look at the question from the other side. Let's say you meet a young, engaged Philadelphian who wants to get into politics and city government, which I'm sure has happened to you. What advice do you give that person about building a career so that they can start on that pathway?
Well, I get a chance to meet with a number of people interested in getting involved in the political process, and to the extent I'm able to meet with them either in my office or a cup of coffee, I try to do that. And I think it depends on what their interests are. I mean, for someone that's interested in working in city council, I'm honest with them. Often those positions come based on someone working on a campaign. There's also not necessarily a Emily's List or a LinkedIn site for, these jobs are open and just come right in. Unfortunately, a person may leave and then another person may come in very quickly. So to the extent that I'm able to let people know about openings, I try to do that. But I also suggest to people to, network with various members, do things like come to caucus and meet with people. I advise people who are trying to lobby city council or just network city council. If you come to the caucus session between 9:45 and 10:45, you get a chance to meet a lot of people in City Hall, especially on the legislative side, and that's an opportunity. But, and that's other small things, like the Public Record is a newspaper that comes out weekly. There's a lot of different events and activities in there. There are a number of things in there you can attend that are not for a fee. That are free, various town hall meetings, other activities, and either network on a campaign or volunteer on a campaign. But use the opportunities to meet people. From my experience, most people are very flattered when you ask them if you can meet with them for an informational interview. That was guidance I was given at a young age, and so for most people, I would say just take the initiative and reach out to a member of council if you're interested in getting to know what they are, what their background may have been, and more likely than not, they'll say, yes, I would love to meet with you. Now, timing may be challenging because of people's schedules, but from my experience, most people are willing to sit down and talk with you about their background, how they got to where they are, and that could help you for where you're trying to go in your future.
It's incredibly helpful advice. I wonder if you ever go to like either Temple or LaSalle or St. Joe's or Penn or wherever and share that kind of real basic advice to young people who are trying to figure out a way to break in.
Yeah, I often, people ask me to speak at different events and organizations. I just recently spoke at a leadership initiative for senior staffers at the airport about maybe 3 weeks ago, and I just kind of offer some of my basic perspectives. A good friend of mine, Suleiman Rahman, has an organization called Diverse Force, which reminds me of an organization I was involved in years ago called the Urban League Leadership Institute. And so they try to place and provide training for people to how to serve on nonprofit boards. Every year I speak at his graduation event and kind of give that perspective. But I just try to impart some of the things that people told me to others.
Familiar with Suleiman's work, and it's great that you engage with him as well. We'll switch it up for you a little bit here. You're also known as a real proponent of small business in the city, and you're co-chair of Council's Special Committee on Regulatory Review and Reform, which is Council's effort to streamline the regulatory code in Philadelphia, make it easier to start and grow a small business. Talk to us a little bit about why this effort's important to you, and a few highlights from your first term of work.
Well, I think it's an important issue because when you look at the city of Philadelphia, we now are at a 25% poverty rate. We're the biggest city in the country with that high level of poverty. And so to me, the best way to address poverty is by growing jobs. The best creator of jobs are small businesses. And so every business started as a small business. I don't care if it's in IBM and Apple, McDonald's, and Uber. And they all started with someone with an idea, either at their kitchen table, at their garage, or in their basement. And so for me, the best way we can address poverty is by growing ourselves out of poverty. And the way you do that, from my experience, is through small businesses. And that goes back to my experience as a small business lender with Meridian Bank, as well as being an entrepreneur and also attorney representing small businesses. So that's been my focus. I've been fortunate that the council president appointed me as one of the 3 co-chairs to this special committee on regulatory reform and review, along with our commerce director, Harold Epps, and the president and CEO of the Greater Philadelphia Chamber of Commerce, Rob Wunderling. And so through those experiences, we've tried to repeal various bills and legislation. We've done that. I've probably repealed more legislation than I've passed at this point. But we try to get rid of antiquated legislation that's in the code. We've also, worked with a lot of different small businesses and some of the larger businesses that have been part of this special committee, and really got a chance to learn some of the challenges that people have in doing business in the city of Philadelphia. Yes, we have some challenges in reference to our tax code and tax policy, but it's also the regulations that are also challenging. I learned from this process that a lot of regulations, you wouldn't necessarily know how they become enacted, but through this process. And that's something I learned, that some departments have a board that will hear opposition and promulgate regarding regulations. Other departments, it's the commissioner that she or he promulgates regulations with input from the public at large. So from that process, we're now thinking about how do we emulate what other cities have, and having all regulations in one central repository, and also trying to create a uniform protocol for how regulations are adopted and amended, so that way if the legislation we've been done recently have had more and more of a need for regulations to be drafted to help implement that legislation. And so there's definitely a greater need for that type of transparency. So some of the things we're looking at for 2020 is how do we, one, take all of the regulations, they're all at the records department, but pull them information, make sure they're in a location is easy for people to access electronically, and also provide some transparency on reference to the process of how something becomes a regulation, because different departments do things generally. The code is very broad in how regulations get adopted. So we're looking at that as something going through in 2020 as a way to continue to help make it easier for small businesses to do business in the city of Philadelphia.
That's really interesting. That's you're talking about something like akin to like the Federal Register.
Right, that's exactly. And I used to, when I was in the law department, I used to represent the Office of Housing and Community Development. So the Code of Federal Regulations is an area that we worked with quite a bit, because they gave interpretive guidance on how to use community development, federal community development block grant dollars. Also, before I joined the law department, and before I was in the district attorney's office, I was a securities enforcement attorney. So we also followed SEC guidelines quite a bit. So having that type of regulatory framework in a one-stop shop, and people understand that if there's a new piece of legislation that's passed it and it's contemplating regulations being adopted, this is where existing regulations are housed. This is how the regulations will be adopted. If you want to question or challenge, have input, this is the process of doing that. So that's something that we're looking at. And because I'm very active in different organizations like the National League of Cities, Democratic Municipal Officials, Pennsylvania Municipal League, as well as New Deal leaders, I can reach out to my colleagues in other jurisdictions to try to get best practices that we can bring back to Philadelphia.
That is really interesting, and those are things that I know for one did not know about. One more business question for you. So you are seen as somebody who understands the business community for obvious reasons, given your background. Sometimes you hear the business community saying, complaining or saying this or that about city council. What advice do you have for the business community as they seek to develop a better relationship with city council?
Well, that's something that I've been thinking about to some degree. We have the Greater Philadelphia Chamber of Commerce, and I do a lot of work with them. They are a member services organization, so for them, their focus is on the services they provide to their members. In other cities, they have, in addition to a member services organization like the Chamber of Commerce, they also have business policy organizations like in D.C. and Atlanta. Coincidentally, those two organizations are run by former mayors. So I think trying to have more engagement at the local level, now that's hard, I understand, because of a small business owner or even a larger business. You are spending the majority of your day trying to provide goods and services to your customers and try to get additional business from those customers. So the ability to come to a city council hearing on a Tuesday at 10:30 may be problematic. But to the extent that you can reach out to council members and invite them to your business location, especially district council members, and you're a local business that's based on a commercial charter, you can take the initiative, just like I talked about earlier with people interested in getting involved in politics and reaching out. To the extent that that business owner can reach out to their council member or council members to come out to their location and see what their life is like as a small business owner, some of the issues, and having that type of dialogue and opening up that dialogue, something that can be beneficial, and you can do it in a way that does not necessarily impact the business owner's time, but also start to create that dialogue and opportunity for communications between that elected official and that business owner.
Thank you for that very much.
Okay, I'm going to lighten up. I got a lighter question here coming up for you. On December 6th, you'll once again be taking the polar plunge for Special Olympics. And for those who don't know, this is an event where Philadelphians raise money to support Special Olympics programs by jumping into a vat of freezing cold water at Drexel University outdoors in December. I've seen you do it a few times since you've been here. You've done it every year since you've been a council member. You've encouraged your fellow council members to join in. I think Councilmember Taubenberger did it one year.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm.
Talk to us about why Special Olympics is important to you.
Well, Special Olympics, this is their 50th year, and we call it freezing for a reason. And so for me, it's important because I have a son on the autism spectrum, so I do a lot of work in helping people that have learning or physical differences. Special Olympics do a great job in that regard. Recently, we put together a task force because I've articulated to them that I would like to see the city of Philadelphia to be the world's first city of inclusion by 2026. As you know, we'll have the 250th anniversary of the nation in 2026. So from my perspective, can we use that 2026 timeline as a benchmark and work backwards? So the Special Olympics have taken this idea, they talked to their national office in Chicago, and so now we're moving forward in this concept of cities of inclusion. We had our first meeting at Lincoln Financial Field probably about a year and a half ago. Their Pittsburgh office also had a similar meeting at PNC Park, and so now we're meeting on a monthly basis and how we pull together a number of interests in how we can make Philadelphia the world's first city of inclusion. We meet at the Chamber of Commerce generally on a Thursday afternoon. Sometimes I'm a little bit late because the council can sometimes go a little longer. But Special Olympics does a lot of great things. My son has competed in Special Olympics as a student in the school district at his former school, actually his current school as well. And so it's a great organization. They do a lot of great work. It's a unique organization that was started by the Shriver family many, many years ago. And so they do phenomenal work as an international organization. And it's something that I try to promote, and I think there are a number of great Philadelphians that help promote the Special Olympics, and I try to do my part and freeze for a reason.
It is tremendous work, and you've done a lot of work with people with disabilities. You're chair of Council's special committee committee on that, and I'm actually looking forward to the Polar Plunge this year again. We'll definitely be there. You mentioned it on the council floor last week that it was coming up, and you've posted it to social media, challenging your colleagues to join you. Have you gotten any takers yet?
There's one member that said they were going to do it last year, but they were not able to make it. They said they were going to do it this year. There's another member that 2 years ago said they were going to make it, but did not. So I'm not going to out them publicly. We'll see if their actions speak louder than their words. But one thing that you suggested, and I didn't think about it, and I'm glad you made the suggestion, that considering we do have 4 new members coming in January, that I will reach out to them and challenge them on coming out on December 6th to participate in the Polar Plunge. We've done a number of unique council bonding activities. I know you're familiar with the fact that Councilmember Curtis Jones started the council rowing team.
Yes.
So I've participated for the past 2 years. I've already put out the call to our newer members.
Yes.
They should join the rowing team so we can do better than our silver medal last year at the Dadville Regatta. So these are the activities I think I try to promote because it's, I went to the University of Virginia, so we have a perspective, kind of Jeffersonian perspective of work hard, play hard. And so having these type of bonding activities provide an opportunity for us to have some fun as we're still addressing some of the serious issues that we have in the city of Philadelphia.
Absolutely, and raising some money and bringing some attention. So I think that you have time. We have 3 more sessions of council. I think there's time to put in a resolution that says that all members elected after November 5th, 2019 have to do the Polar Plunge.
We're going to probably redo the rules, so that could always be possibly added to the rules as a new section that we will adopt as a body on the swearing in on January 6th. So that's an idea I will take under advisement.
There you go. Thank you so much, Councilman.
Thank you.
Just a terrific interview, and we really looked forward to doing this. And thank you very much for your time. And we look forward to interviewing you again on Inside PHL Council.
Thank you.
Visit our website, phlcouncil.com, where you can subscribe to this show, get contact information for each council office, learn more about our legislation, and find dates for upcoming hearings and meetings. Follow us on social media. We're PHL Council on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. If you enjoyed this show, we'd appreciate a rating on iTunes, Google Podcasts, or your favorite podcast app. Inside PHL Council is produced by Philadelphia City Council. This episode is adjourned to the call of the next upload. Thanks for listening.